Jamie hoisted a battered suitcase up the last flight of stairs, feeling the old wood creak under her feet. The narrow hallway was dim, even in the afternoon. Gray paint peeled away in odd, curling flakes, and the soft thud of her steps echoed back at her. She stopped outside her new door, number 3C, and set the suitcase down. The corridor smelled faintly musty, like paperbacks forgotten in sunlight. Outside a single window at the end of the hall, rain streaked down, blurring the view of the alley below. It didn't bother her at first, the quiet, the isolation. She had chosen this apartment precisely for that. Somewhere to put down roots without being noticed, somewhere to shake the sense of being watched that seemed to cling to her in the busy city. Here, in these faded walls, Jamie hoped that feeling would finally fall away. Inside, the apartment was only 3 rooms, but it was hers. She unpacked slowly, arranging the few items that made the place feel real: a chipped mug from her last apartment, some dried lavender tied with twine, a thick blue blanket. By sunset, shadows pooled in the corners. She flicked on a single lamp. The quiet settled in, a quiet so complete it pricked the skin. Jamie wandered to the kitchen, started the kettle, and leaned against the countertop, listening for any sound beyond the hum of old pipes. Nothing. Hours later, after a meal eaten over her laptop and a few tentative texts to friends back home, she shut off the lights. The bed looked strange in the half-light, wedged between 2 narrow windows. She lay down, pulling the blanket to her chin and letting her eyes adjust to the unfamiliar shapes, the tall wardrobe, the slatted radiator. Her mind buzzed, replaying each creak and groan in the building. When sleep finally came, it was shallow. Every little shift in the silence seemed too sharp. Somewhere in the stretch between midnight and morning, she woke to a faint tapping sound. Jamie blinked at the ceiling, heart quickening. Tap. Tap. She thought perhaps it was rain. But it came again, not from outside, but from the hallway. Slow, deliberate. She lay rigid, listening, straining to parse the noise from her own pulse thudding in her ears. Then it stopped. Nothing. She drifted back down, uncertain if she had dreamed it at all. The next day, rain drummed steadily on the windows. Jamie shuffled down the hall, mug in hand, still in her pajamas. The gray-haired woman from 3B was locking her door. Jamie hesitated, then nodded politely. "Did you hear anything strange last night?" The woman glanced up, confused, eyes disappearing behind thick glasses. "Strange? Like tapping, I guess." Jamie felt awkward, suddenly wishing she hadn't spoken. The woman frowned, shaking her head. "This old building always makes odd sounds, dear. Don't let it trouble you. You'll get used to it." And then she offered a brisk smile, already moving away down the stairs. Jamie tried to smile back, but the laughter in the woman's voice held no comfort. It seemed to echo, "You'll get used to it," long after Jamie shut her own door again. That afternoon faded into evening. She unpacked the last box and set a lamp on her bedside table. At dusk, wind rattled the window panes. She tried to read, but her eyes kept wandering to the old wooden door across the dim room. She told herself it was just nerves, a new space, unfamiliar sounds. That was all. The second night, exhaustion tugged at her, but sleep played hard to catch. She hovered in a restless half-dream, caught between waking and not. At some blurred hour, a stuttering chill crept through the room. She rolled onto her side, face angled toward the door. There, a faint figure, just outside the door, visible through the frosted pane of its upper half. Jamie's mind tried to shape it into something, maybe the outline of a neighbor shuffling by, or the shadow of a coat hanging in the hall. But it didn't move. It stood utterly still, indistinct, like a smudge left by a thumbprint on glass. Where its face should have been, there was only blur, as if the details wouldn't resolve no matter how long she stared. Her heart thudded hard against her ribs. She didn't move, telling herself, it's only the lights from the street, the play of headlights, or her imagination dredging up childish fears. Still, something about the figure's absolute stillness, that inhuman patience, made the tiny hairs along her arms lift. Jamie tightened the blanket around her, holding breath, watching. Minutes slid by. The shape didn't budge. Her chest ached for air. When she finally squeezed her eyes shut and then opened them again, the shape was gone. Or maybe it had never been there. Jamie listened, straining for a sound, a footstep, the rasp of shoes on old wood. Silence. Every muscle ached. She forced herself out of bed, walked quietly to the door, and pressed her eye to the peephole. Nothing. No one in the hallway. Even the pale sconce light didn't flicker. She stood there for a long moment, breathing shallow and ragged, hand braced tight on the doorknob. There was a memory at the edge of her mind, stories told as children, warnings about seeing things others could not. The fear crept quietly, almost gentle. It didn't shout, it whispered. Morning came gray and sluggish. Jamie shuffled through motions, coffee, a soggy granola bar, a half-hearted attempt at making the place home. She kept looking at the door. Each time, her eyes were drawn to the frosted pane, searching for something. Later, she tried once more with her neighbor. Did you have anyone visit last night? Another quick smile, this one sharper. No one ever visits me this late. Are you sure you're not just tired, dear? Something shuddered behind the woman's eyes. The day wore on. Light faded again. Jamie told herself she wouldn't look at the door so much tonight. She set her phone on the bedside table, within reach, and curled up early, more drained than she expected. It was quiet, still. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Deep in the night, a soft sound, lighter than tapping, more like a gentle brush, woke her. Jamie's eyes blinked open into shadow. The figure was there again, clear, in the blurred rectangle of glass. It was closer this time, she was sure, as if drawn forward by her gaze. She could see just enough, a shape, tall, shoulders slightly hunched. Its face remained stubbornly out of focus, a smear of pale and gray. Jamie pressed her back into the mattress, paralyzed by something between waking and sleep. Her mind raced, am I dreaming? Is this sleep paralysis? The walls felt like they were pulsing in and out, pressing closer with each breath she took. The figure didn't move, but it didn't have to. Terror threaded through her thoughts. She forced her arm to stretch for her phone, fumbling it off the table, the plastic clatter impossibly loud in the hush. She dialed Lauren, her closest friend, thumb shaking. When the phone connected, Jamie stared at the silent figure beyond her door. "Hey," she whispered when Lauren answered. "Jamie? It's late. What's wrong?" Jamie hesitated, the words backing up in her throat. She stared at the door, mouth dry. A laugh came out instead, thin and unconvincing. "Nothing, sorry. Just couldn't sleep." Lauren didn't press. "Text me if you need me, okay?" "Yeah. Night." Jamie ended the call with trembling fingers. She watched the figure, but it was already gone. Where it had stood, only the faintest reflection drifted in the glass, her own face, pressed pale in the dark. She lay awake for a long time, the heavy quiet settling thick around her, listening for any sign that she was not, as she hoped, alone. Jamie pressed the new security chain into place for the 5th time, sliding it open, then closed again, like someone turning a worry over and over in her mind. It was an old door, swollen a little with damp at the bottom, and the brass chain felt just slightly too frail for her liking. She'd bought it hours earlier, after another evening trying, and failing, to relax in her unfamiliar apartment. The chain was a small comfort, but she was acutely aware of how little separated her from the outside hallway. It was as if the door itself were just a membrane, thin as skin. Night was falling beyond the filthy glass of her kitchen window, each minute stretching on. Across the living room, her unpacked boxes cast uneven shadows. Jamie found herself unable to sit. She drifted instead, hands tucked under her arms, pacing from one room to the next. It wasn't the first time she had felt exposed, but here, the sensation was different, heavier, more immediate, as if the air itself pressed down on her neck. She lingered by the front door, drawn to the peephole. The warped metal frame left a ring of coldness against her eyebrow as she peered out. The hallway lamp, yellow and dust-dimmed, buzzed overhead, and its light lay in thin stripes across the cracked tile. It all seemed unchanged, just as it had all week, empty, save for the occasional drift of voices from one of the other apartments, too muffled to understand. Yet Jamie could not shake the sense that something waited just out of sight. Sometimes, when she stepped away, she fancied she saw a flicker of movement at the corner of her vision, a suggestion of presence out there. Not quite a shadow, not quite a person. Was it only her imagination? Or had the nights of poor sleep sharpened her nerves until ordinary darkness was suddenly full of shape and meaning? She started at a faint, tapping noise from the hallway, probably a pipe, she told herself. Still, her heart thudded, quick and shallow. In the reflection of the door's brass knob, she thought she caught the blurred outline of a figure, tall, unmoving, just beyond the immediate circle of the peephole's view. But when she looked again, nothing was there. Just the sagging carpet, the stripe of faded wallpaper. By 10 o'clock, Jamie retreated to the bathroom and locked the door behind her, letting the tap run for a minute, listening to the water hit the porcelain, then turning off the light. She sat in the dark, her eyes closed, her breath hard, her heart racing. She felt the need to get out, to get away, to get away. She felt the need to get out. 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 She felt the trying to drown out the uneasy quiet of the apartment. In the mirror above the sink, her own face looked pale and unfamiliar. As she leaned in to splash cold water on her cheeks, another shape flickered behind her, pale and elongated in the steam-fogged reflection. She spun, eyes wide, but the room was empty. Only the light bulb's tired whine and her own ragged breath filled the space. Her mind's eye still saw the suggestion of someone standing in the open doorway, silent as a memory and just as insistent. The feeling lingered as she dried her face and left the bathroom, moving with careful, deliberate steps. Desperate for some explanation, Jamie decided to ask her landlord the next morning about the apartment and its past. She made herself knock on the door of apartment 1A, not trusting herself to wait another hour in unease. The landlord, a stooped man with gray in his beard and old cigarette stains on his fingers, peered out at her, a little surprised. "Is everything all right in there?" he asked. His voice rasped, slow from years of disuse. Jamie hesitated. "Have there been problems with the apartment or the hallway?" She tried to keep her voice casual, aware of how suspicious she must sound, standing in her slippers in the corridor. He frowned. "Problems?" She searched his lined face for any sign of understanding. "Or with old tenants, maybe. Anyone ever mention?" She trailed off, embarrassed. How could she explain the half-glimpsed shapes, the prickling sense of unease? The landlord shrugged thinly. "People move in and out. Always do. Some don't last long. Never said why, just left." Jamie swallowed. Was there something wrong with the apartment before? He shook his head, pushing the door half shut. "If there was, no one told me. Old buildings, they settle. Creak a bit. Gets lonely, sometimes. But nothing more than that." The conversation hung awkwardly in the air. Whatever hope Jamie had felt for clarity slipped away. The landlord's expression was politely blank. It was clear her questions wouldn't go any further here. As she drifted back towards her apartment, his door clicked softly closed behind her. The day wore on, sluggish and heavy. Jamie tried to fill the nervous spaces with tasks. She cleaned the kitchen counters, sorted through her mail, rearranged the few books on her shelf. Still, she caught herself glancing toward the front door every few minutes, alert for any sound above the hush of her own motions. In the silvery puddle of dusk, her reflection stretched long across the living room window, the faint suggestion of another face caught just behind her shoulder. Each time, she whipped around, heart racing, but always found herself completely alone. Later, she set her phone on the bedside table and crawled beneath the thin quilt. She checked the lock, then the security chain again. Everything was exactly as she left it. Still her mind wouldn't quiet. In the deepening dark, ordinary sounds grew too loud, the slow tick of the old clock, the hissing radiator, the distant elevator doors clanging open and shut. Sleep drifted hopelessly out of reach, snatched away by the feeling of being scrutinized through thin walls. When sleep finally came, it was like falling into water, heavy, cold, and bottomless. Something woke her in the thick small hours. Jamie's eyes opened, but her body would not move. She lay flat, paralyzed, only able to see the gray slice of hallway beyond her open bedroom door. The apartment was utterly silent except for the rough rush of her own breath in her ears. That was when she heard it, the faintest click as the handle on her front door began to turn. Her vision sharpened, every detail made stark by the inability to look away. She could see the outline of the door against the faint spill of hallway light, the security chain stretched tight. The knob creaked in slow, measured angles. But the door did not open. Jamie tried to call out, to move her hand or even twitch her fingers, but her body remained heavy as stone. The sense of presence grew stronger, as if someone, or something, stood inches from the door's other side, watching her through its battered surface. Helpless, Jamie stared at the door until her eyes stung, every muscle in her body rigid with terror and exhaustion. Reflections danced at the far edge of her vision, shadows pulling away from the wall, twisting softly in shapes she could not name. Her chest ached with the effort of breathing, and still she could not move. She was not sure how much time passed, seconds or minutes, before the clicking stopped. The chain settled with a gentle, final clang. The presence faded, leaving only the high, empty ring of silence behind. Eventually, the weight left her body all at once. Jamie gasped and jerked upright, fresh sweat chilling her skin. It was dawn now, the kind of wan, depleted light that made everything pale and formless. She stumbled to the front door, pressing her palm over the cold metal knob. The chain was still fixed in place. But as she peered closer, she found something she hadn't noticed before, small, dark smudges around the lock, as if someone had pressed their fingertips into the wood. Faint, almost invisible, but definitely there. Jamie stood frozen, the world shrinking to that one small patch of door. Outside, beyond the glass, a new day was rising, but with it came a deeper dread, a certainty that she would never again sleep as deeply, now that she knew what tried each night to cross the threshold. The city's ordinary noises became wounds rather than comforts after another night with too little sleep. Jamie blinked through fluorescent glare at her computer screen, the office around her buzzing low and far away. The sound of keys tapping, a cough here and there, the gurgle of the coffee maker. All these sounds moved around her, untouched by her tension. She could feel sweat at her temples and the rough pulse in her jaw, and she tried to steady her hands as she clicked through emails that barely registered. She knew she was behaving strangely. She caught herself jumping when the phone rang, flinching at a sudden laugh from the other side of the office. That sense, something not quite right, felt clear in everyone's tone. She met the glance of her supervisor as she passed by. Jamie tried to sit up straight, to look busy, but that glance lingered, questioning. A little after lunch, the lead from her team, Michaela, slid into the chair beside her. Jamie's vision fluttered for a second. She tried to focus. Michaela's voice kept soft, as if worried the words might scare her. "Hey, you alright, Jamie?" "Yeah. Just tired." "Didn't sleep," Jamie answered quickly. Her voice was wrong, brittle. Michaela studied her, worry flickering. "Han, you've looked exhausted for a week. Maybe you should take a day or two. Clear your head." Jamie wanted to insist she was fine, that it was nothing. She nearly said it. But the fatigue was too deep, the memory of a faceless shape at her door blurring into every waking hour. She nodded, swallowing. "I'll try." But on the train home she watched the glass for shadows, unable to let herself relax. Her head ached. That corridor would be waiting, door swollen shut, chain rattling. The presence rooted now in her routines. In her apartment, she moved with the same weariness, dropping her satchel, coat, and shoes in dull sequence. The walls pressed in. Jamie lingered in the small kitchen, hands poised on the counter. She reached for her phone, knuckles pale. There was no other way. She needed proof. She hardly knew what she needed, only that the problem could not be solved by sleep or talk. She had tried to tell herself it was in her head. That had failed. She needed something to show, something to counter the hollow, sickening silence from her friends. She had texted Laura, but her words, "I feel watched. There's someone out there. Please just believe me," were answered only by a little heart emoji. No one believed. Instead, Jamie set her jaw, ready to find evidence for herself. She fished her tripod from a box and propped her phone at shin level on the thin rug by the front door. She tested the camera, angling it quietly, making sure the frame ran from the old doormat up to the peephole, taking in the faint strip of hallway visible through the crack beneath. The app began to record, screen glowing cold and blank. Time passed slowly. She kept checking the camera, restless. The late afternoon bled away behind the drawn shades, and Jamie half expected to hear a knock, a scrape, a shoe scuff. Yet there was nothing, only that oppressive anticipation and her own shallow breathing. After an hour, she shut the camera and pulled the video into her lap, hands trembling as she scrolled. At first, the footage was as dull as her memory, a still hallway, lumpy doormat, a slow kaleidoscope of shifting city light. She kept watching, eyes darting, muscle jumping at every odd reflection. Then, at the moment she remembered, the end of the hallway shadowed, time matching the chill creeping through her apartment, the screen shuttered. A burst of static washed the image in gray. Then a flicker, faster than she could process, vague movement, impossible to see. For less than a heartbeat the picture blurred, a smear of light and then darkness. Just enough to unsettle, to suggest. After that, emptiness again. Jamie ran her hand through her hair, fingers knotted, biting her thumbnail until she tasted iron. She ran the video back, forward, frame by frame, nothing. Only that indistinct glitch. It could have been her phone. It could have been anything. But she knew, deep in her marrow, what she had hoped to see, and what had slid just outside the bounds of vision. As the sun set, pale and sickly through the window, Jamie messaged Laura again, more desperate now. She typed, "Something is here. It's real. Please come over tonight." The reply took a small eternity, "Sure, I'll bring snacks. Hang in there, Jamie." The knock at the door startled Jamie so badly she dropped her mug. It spun across the counter, sloshing tea over her palm. "Jamie?" "It's me," Laura called. Jamie opened up, darting her eyes up and down the hall before she let Lara pass. Her pulse hammered. There was nothing in the corridor, not even the faintest ghost of movement. Still, Jamie tried to look into the dimness at the far end, sure that if she stared long enough she'd see eyes reflecting back. Lara set her coat down and peered inside, casual, easy. Jamie envied her calm, the way she surveyed the room as if it were entirely empty of threat. They sat on the couch, a movie flickering on mute for company. Jamie kept glancing at the little entryway between rooms, where the cold seemed thicker, untouched by the apartment's single radiator. "I can show you the recording," Jamie said at last, pushing her phone across the coffee table. "You might see something I missed." Lara obliged, squinting, thumb dancing over the screen. The edge of a smile touched her lips as she scrolled. But after 2 minutes she pushed the phone away gently. "I didn't see anyone, Jamie. Just white noise, glitches. I think your camera's messing up." Jamie's voice cracked. "It happens right where I always see it. It's never clear, but I know." Lara put an arm around her shoulders, the gesture kind. "You need to rest, Jamie. Really. You look half dead." Jamie tried to nod, but tears were crowding her vision. She wanted to explain, about the breath on the back of her neck, the prickling sensation that grew sharper each hour, the certainty of non-belonging in her own space. It would sound unbalanced. So she swallowed the truth instead, biting her lip and staring past Lara toward the door. Outside, the hallway stretched on, doors firmly shut, light weak. But, there it was. Not a shadow, not a shape, but the fullness of a person, standing just where the wall met the stairwell. Out of reach but visible to Jamie's exhausted, trembling eyes. The stranger's head was tilted, face blurred by shadow. No one else in the building ever stood there, certainly not at this hour, unmoving. Jamie's breath clashed tight in her throat. "Do you see that?" she whispered, nodding her head at the door, forcing herself not to point. Lara turned, following Jamie's gaze, then shook her head. "There's nothing there. It's just empty. Jamie, look at me, there is nothing there." But Jamie kept watching. Her fingers dug into her thigh, nails sharp. The figure just watched her back, motionless, hidden where ordinary light couldn't reveal anything. After Lara left, Jamie locked the door, checked the chain twice, 3 times. The building was silent, thick with after-midnight hush. She retreated to her bedroom, climbed beneath the covers, heart thudding. The cold seeped through the blankets, a chill that felt more deliberate than any weather should allow. Her bones ached from weariness and nerves. Sleep came as a falling, a sinking she could neither welcome nor fight. She woke, she did not know what hour, paralyzed on her back. Eyes wide, breath locked in her chest. The old, tight grip of sleep paralysis, sight divorced from meaningful motion, body almost numb but wholly awake. She tried to scream, to move even a finger. Her heartbeat thundered against her ribs. The air had gone bitter, turning each inhale into a cold ache inside her nostrils. She stared across the dim room at the thin outline of her bedroom door, and saw the stranger, pressed up close to the apartment's front entrance beyond, face pale and unfocused, so close she could see fog dancing on the old glass where a mouth should be. No features, just unformed shadows and the suggestion of intent, gaze locked with hers through 2 rooms and a heavy door. A soundless whisper curled into the cold. The stranger moved their mouth. Her name tumbled through the darkness as if it were spoken, but her ears rang with utter silence, nothing but the shape of her own name, drawn over and over in the thinning air. Jamie's limbs strained, her lungs desperate for breath, but nothing would move. That's when she felt the breath, cold as snow, slipping under the crack beneath the front door, across the floor, colder and colder, reaching her exposed toes with dread. The room remained silent, motionless, except for the invisible presence pressing closer, always closer, as sleep held her captive and the darkness hummed with her name. Jamie sat on the bedroom floor, folding a line of salt into a careful border at the foot of the door. She had never believed in rituals like this, her mother's soft mutters over incense, her grandmother's careful circles of chalk in the corners of rooms, all seemed like ghosts of someone else's life. But dawn had faded hours ago, and her limbs were muddled with exhaustion. She didn't feel herself anymore, not frightened, exactly, but hollowed out with a kind of patient terror. The bag of salt, heavy in her hands, was a final effort, pressed into service as if this powder, halfway between earth and sky, could do any more than she could on her own. She wiped her palm on her jeans, gritty with nerves. The apartment was still, washed in amber from the lamp's tired bulb. Each breath came shallow through her chest, careful. Outside, the city's late shift had faded, streets emptied by the hour. Even the scratch of her own movement seemed too loud, shocking in the silence that was now deeper, as though muffling every space just beyond her door. Over the past nights, she had watched the figure at her door, never moving, standing too still, appearing only when she was alone to see it, a careful distortion in the air. Her phone's camera caught nothing but grainy dark. Calls to her mother ended with anxious, thin words, "You're too tired, Jamie, try to rest." Sleep was not rest anymore. It was waiting, stretched tight like piano wire. She did not want to close her eyes, feeling certain that she would find the figure inside her apartment, standing in the doorway, not outside. Tonight could not be another night of pretending it was all in her head. Every noise, every silence, felt pointed, like the quiet was making room for something. Jamie gathered her heaviest mugs and bowls, setting them as clumsy sentries along the window ledge and behind the front door. She left the kitchen light on, a shaky promise of comfort in the pooled yellow. She placed her phone, plugged in, on the table where she could always see it. With what little courage she still possessed, Jamie sat facing the door and waited. For a long time, nothing happened. She watched the glow of the street lamp outside dim and shift with the slow crawl of the city's dawn. Her mind wandered, or tried to. She counted the lines in the wallpaper, picked at memories from childhood, replayed the way her hands still shook when she tried to unlock her apartment, daring herself not to look over her shoulder. Each second stretched like taffy. Eventually, the air shifted. Something outside her thin door, a hush, too intent. Charlotte, the neighbor next door, hadn't left her apartment since Saturday. Jamie hadn't heard her radio, not even her television. No distant footsteps in the corridor, just the slow tick of her own breath and a thick, oppressive stillness. She became aware of her heart, beating just under her collarbone. The shadows around the doorframe seemed to pulse and lengthen. Jamie pressed her hands together, feeling her knuckles grind. At first, she tried to reason with herself. She was sleep-deprived, caught at the muddy bottom of another bad night. Her brain was simply picking up the residue of stress. But that old, unnatural silence continued, stretching on and on, washing over the room until she found herself straining to hear the smallest creak or click. But there was nothing, no sound of plumbing, no car passing below, no shudder of wind through the battered windows. Only the hum of the refrigerator, far away. And then, with cruel precision, even that was snipped away. The apartment, suddenly, was perfectly quiet. Jamie jerked as her phone's screen flickered, then went black. The charger's red light dimmed out with a soft click. She blinked in the sudden hollow dark. The lamp's glow warbled, trembled, then steadied to just a thin, trembling candle glow of light. She grabbed the phone, thumb tapping the power button again and again. Nothing. The plastic felt cold and distant in her hand. She wanted to call for help. She very nearly did, but the silence felt too thick to break, and something inside her knew, deeply, dreadfully, that if she spoke, the brittle thinness of her voice would only make her more alone. Jamie hadn't felt like herself for days, but this was the worst yet, as if the apartment itself no longer belonged to her. She could almost sense it, a boundary fraying where she sat, the world, her world, tilting. A shadow rose slowly in the narrow gap between the lower doorframe and the parquet floor. First, she saw nothing, only the usual slice of darkness she glimpsed every night. Then, out of that dark, a thin, deliberate shape began to form, an outline that bent and thinned and pressed up against the pale sliver of light leaking under the door. It stopped, motionless. Jamie tried not to blink. She felt as if her eyes were dry, the weight of sleepless nights pinching behind each socket. She pressed herself back against the wall. Her chest hurt from holding her breath. In the weak lamplight, the salt at the threshold caught the light with a strange, dull glow. Minutes, hours, passed in this crouched stillness. She tried not to close her eyes. She counted muffled heartbeats, catalogued aches in her shoulders and neck. She closed her eyes for just a second. When she looked again, it was no longer quiet. There was a soft, rhythmic sound, as though someone, or something, had begun to breathe, deep and slow, from just beyond the door. The skin under her scalp prickled with dread. Every cell told her to run, but she could not move. Her whole body was locked. Suddenly, without warning, the breathing stopped. The silence was worse than the sound. Jamie lay curled up, staring at the gap under the door, and that was when she realized it. The hallway was lighter now. A soft, pale dawn pressed through the small kitchen window, mixing with the lamp's glow in odd, feverish shadows along the wall. She looked at the door and saw, for the first time, a full silhouette standing just inside the threshold. The figure was no longer outside but just beyond her line of sight, wavering slightly in the unsure light. Its outline was wrong, too tall, shoulders skewed, edges trembling as if it wasn't quite fully there. She couldn't see a face, but the feeling of being watched had become a physical pressure. Her skin felt too tight, her mouth dry and full of iron. She wanted to scream, but her voice would not come. She tried to blink, but her lashes felt glued shut. Everything in the room felt frozen around her, the air, the salt, the lingering yellow of dawn. The shadow reached a thread-thin hand toward the wall, toward her. Jamie flinched, but she could not move away, could not call for help. Something in the air shifted, the border between waking and dreaming falling loose. She was not sure what was happening, if she was asleep, or awake, or something between. She felt herself floating, or falling, the figure smeared across her vision like an afterimage burned too deep into her eyes. Its presence spread, silent, merging with the shadow spilling away from her own body. For a moment, she felt her chest shudder as if another breath came inside her own. The light quivered, and the figure grew blurred, wide, then thin, then gone. Jamie shivered. The room was exactly as before, the salt line unbroken, the lamp still burning, the city outside beginning to shift and hum to life. She pushed herself up, feeling every muscle protest. Her head swam as she walked toward the bathroom, needing water. She turned on the light, cold and clinical as it flickered up to itself. She moved to the mirror, splashing water onto her face, breathing slow, harsh breaths. It felt good, just for a moment, to feel something so ordinary. When she raised her eyes to the mirror, something in her mind faltered. Her reflection stared back, pale lips pressed thin, circles dark under each eye. But she could see, just beyond her right shoulder, a faint, patient silhouette. Its shape blurred and tall, unmoving, as though it had always belonged there, just waiting for her to notice. Jamie did not turn around, did not speak. She simply watched herself standing in the bathroom mirror, breathing in slow, uneven gulps, as the dawn spilled cold light across the floor and the figure behind her stood, silent, so close it might have been her own shadow. As if, by noticing it, she had invited it in, and now, she was no longer sure there was any way to keep it out.